minutes. So now I invite the already mic'd up next panel to the stage, moderated by Oliver Franz from E.ON, who I've heard actually before, and he's really a good moderator. So Oliver, please.
So, good morning, also from my side. My name is Oliver Franz. I work for E.ON in Germany. I run a department that is called European Associations. So what I'm doing right now really is my job. Sometimes I can't believe it myself. Good morning also to the panelists. Very nice to have you here. Usually I would suggest that it might even be better if you introduced yourself. Still, I'll try. So we have Amy Clark from Octopus Energy, who is the head of commercial. I still wonder whether that is really the title. And maybe you can elaborate a bit on what that implies. And Amy has been very instrumental, I'm told, in bringing what you probably know is the Octopus program for Italy and Germany to life, and has a deep experience insofar in bringing heat pumps to markets. Welcome. Nice to have you. Then there's Sonia Salo, who has co-founded what I was just told by herself, one of the first, let's say, startups that was really focusing on energy efficiency, which was a novelty back then, Capacity.io it's called. What they are doing in the end is really to try and put intelligence upon the steering, if I understand it correctly, of the heat pump to make it even more efficient and also use, in markets where that is already possible, of course, the price differences in the electricity that they use to produce the heat then. And the two ladies are accompanied by two gentlemen, so we almost have a balanced panel. I'm the only odd man out here. I may welcome Kai Stevens, who is working as a product manager for Tato. And Tato and what Capacity.io does is a bit similar, but also different, because I understand that you are mostly working on thermostats, probably also some intelligent ones, I believe, again with the idea of creating, let's say, a more intelligent heating environment, I would say, throughout the houses. And then we have Andy Bradley, last but not least. Andy has founded his own enterprise, which was called Delta. Delta has now merged, I understand, with LCP, which is now then LCP Delta. And you are more, let's say, taking a consultancy approach to the whole market. And Andy is here today also to speak about the potential of heating as a service. Without any further ado, let's maybe start into the discussion. And maybe, Amy, if I may start with you. So can you tell us a bit about how Octopus is trying to really maximize the impact of heat pumps and how that also fits into the whole Octopus approach to the energy business and so on?
Yeah, sure. So we entered the heat pump business about 3 years ago, and our goal has really been to make heat pumps as easy and cheap as possible to buy, to really put them on a level playing field with gas boilers or oil boilers in some countries. And the good thing about being a fairly new entrant to the market is you can kind of see the bits that work well and the things that don't work so well and improve upon those. And we've really spent the past 3 years and over £50 million in investment looking at the end-to-end heat pump experience and how can we optimize every single piece of that. From the installers, so we've committed to train 1,000 installers this year, which, to put that in context, in the UK there's only around 4,000. In terms of the supply chain, we acquired our own manufacturer, Red, a year and a half ago, and just last week we launched our new heat pump with them and our kind of cozy ecosystem. And on the sales process as well, we've really kind of relentlessly optimized that to make it as slick and easy as possible. And the result of all those things is we're selling heat pumps about £3,000 cheaper on average in the UK at the moment, which, when you combine that with the new grant, means we're now selling heat pumps from £500, which is really amazing. And I just want to reflect on that, because Michael was talking yesterday about the achoo, the sneeze moment. And it really feels like, we're at that tipping point now where in some countries, at least, heat pumps are cheaper than gas boilers, which is great.
Absolutely. Maybe, if I may keep with Amy for a second, there, of course, have been a few policy changes in the UK. So it is my understanding that Mr. Sunak is backing away a bit from from being what was a pretty, let's say, agile climate mandate towards a more waiting kind of approach, and also the German government had its hiccups. So how did you cope with that? Was it something that somehow affected you, or were you just saying, let's keep our course steady and don't care for what governments do? Because we are probably at a tipping point when the market will do it anyway.
Yeah, I think people in the industry had some kind of negative views on that. But actually, if you look at the public, you know, someone said yesterday, no press is bad press in heat pumps. And I really think that's true. They definitely perceived that really positively. We had literally 5 times the normal level of interest last week. And I don't see that going away. And I think the approach that the German and the UK government are taking, you know, they've set a clear direction for electrification. I was really pleased that hydrogen wasn't mentioned in Rishi's announcement. And they're just trying to move from stick more to carrot, which I think in the current climate with consumers is the right way to go. We've always advocated that you don't need a ban. We need to make the products good enough that they can compete with gas boilers. And I think we're on the tipping point for that now.
Okay. Speaking of making them good enough is probably a very good moment to bring Sonja into this discussion. So what is, how should I say, the value that you believe you can add to the proposal that is made by Emmy and Octopus and lots of other guys and girls in this room by connecting them to the internet in the end and whatever, play around with the data, create peer groups and whatever you do. So if you could elaborate on that maybe a bit.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we believe that connected heat pumps are like good for the planet and for your wallet. And that is because instead of having like for a consumer like a financial risk in buying a heat pump, it should be like a source of comfort and security, and at the end also like real energy savings. And that is coming through like having like an internet connected heat pump, having like cloud service that you have, maybe a dynamic electricity price such as one from Octopus Energy, and then the smart controls. But smart controls is not like one only thing that you can add as a service. You can add many different kind of services for the consumers, and that is also like part of the future in that.
And just for me to understand that, and maybe some people in the crowd also have the same idea. So would that just be done by just looking at the heat pumps themselves, or would you eventually endeavor also into looking at the thermostats and collecting that kind of data? So how deep do you need to get into the house to really deliver value?
At first, we are starting really from heat pumps. We love heat pumps. We want to be the best ones in controlling heat pumps, and because they are fairly complicated systems, it is good to like really focus on that one first. Really developing or delivering at the same time thermal comfort and good indoor air quality, and at the same time then also the savings. So it's not like a binary thing of like savings or not savings. It's always about like having this kind of like trade-off between like how much comfort do you want to have, how much savings do you want to have, and it depends on like building to building on like what is possible. Regarding like your question on like controlling different kind of devices, yes, we do control also smart thermostats. That's also like a great way to get more savings done. Having a controller that is easy to use, that the customers want to use and want to buy at the end. That is something that we need to have, and the more you have like the controllability and the easier it is to use those products, the better we are getting towards like an electrified system that is actually paying itself faster off.
And if I may add on one question that we haven't agreed upon beforehand. I was always wondering, or we had a long discussion within our own company, or rather predecessor company, whether it was sensible to give people a new device, or whether in the end we needed to put it on here. And I'm strongly believing that you need to put it on here because that's what people use. That's what people engage with. So additional devices and set-top boxes and whatever they are probably don't do the trick, my opinion. And I'm not sure whether you have an opinion on that.
There are a lot of different kind of people. So some people want to have like control it physically through like directly to the heat pump, or have like a remote controller and control it through that. So like our platform is like agnostic on that. You can do like the user is not forced to use our cloud application, or like the application from the heat pump manufacturer. They can actually also use the very physical device. it's really up to like what they want to do, and we are like not jealous of our own brand or anything. They don't have to live in our application. It's rather like that is an extra. They can and go and authenticate their heat pump to the application and then basically never come back.
Okay.
That's also completely fine, and we're happy with it.
Okay.
And the second thing about it is also that you, by having demand response or like using, getting additional income through demand response programs, is also part of like this kind of like invisible controls. So you do the savings, you use the sensible heat storage of the building, and people can use and live in their building as they want to, but just get the savings. And that is the ultimate goal there. Basically, like, you know, HVAC systems are like these kind of things where like the best controls are the ones that do not smell. You don't hear them, you don't see them, you don't feel them.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you also for elaborating on that. Savings is something that Amy mentioned, that you mentioned, and this is maybe the moment to turn over to Kai, because there is, of course, and actually, as a German, I was very ashamed to see the picture the president just showed, because Germany obviously is the market where the gap between the gas price and the electricity price is highest. So how do you generate savings? And of course, time of use is the key word in that. As a good person, I would always try to inquire whether we are talking about time of use on the commodity or on the grid fee or both, which I'm fine with, but I need to understand what it is. So how does that work, and how does your technology play into that?
Yeah, good question, Oliver. Thank you. So originally we are a smart thermostat brand, right? So we have been working in the energy savings efficiency domain with gas-fired boilers for over a decade now. And with that we save up to 28%. Yet there's now a second dimension, now that we're shifting to electricity as a fuel source. My mic, is it breaking up? Or?
No. So I'm hearing you fine.
All right. There's two dimensions. So there's efficiency improvements, and there is what I call lowering the average cost per unit consumed, right? And now that we're shifting towards heat pumps, you see that the promise becomes stronger when you combine those two together. So we have a traditional promise of saving by making your overall heating setup more efficient. And on top of that, with time of use tariffs, you can also bring this promise that we help you to use your heavy appliances, so your heat pump, but also your electric vehicle charging at the times when it's cheapest, so that you can also lower this average cost of per consumed unit.
Okay. And as also it was already mentioned, there is not a conflict, but of course there is always this question of comfort. There's always the question of how much you save, and also Sonia was mentioning it also depends a bit on the dwelling that you're looking upon. So not everything works everywhere, of course, and the legacy of the building itself obviously is an issue. So how do you balance that, or can give us maybe a feeling on? You mentioned the 28%. Does that always work? Is there actually a loss of comfort, or can it be avoided? And what's your take on that?
Yeah, so in the end, I like to put that question to the end user, right? So the end user can choose how much comfort am I willing to compromise to run my heating setup as efficient as possible. So in the end, we always intend to put that choice towards the end user so that they can make that choice. In terms of efficiency improvements, it always depends, right? So if you look at traditional smart thermostats, if you always turn the heating off.
I believe you were right. Your microphone has some failures. Sorry for not recognizing that earlier, people.
It's hard to recognize when you're here if the mic is working or not. Is it better now?
No, that's not working either.
It's not working either.
So maybe we can turn it on. Maybe there's a switch somewhere.
What about Amy's or my mic?
Test. There we go.
Loud and clear.
That works better, yes. So the thing with traditional smart thermostats is it depends on your own behavior. If before adopting a smart thermostat, you were always turning off your thermostat when you left your home, if you were manually configuring the flow temperature of your boiler to the sweet spot, there's zero savings, right? While with the second dimension, so lowering the average cost per unit consumed, there's guaranteed savings. Because we have this increased volatility in the energy prices, it comes with the promise that you will always save when you have a smart solution that helps you shift your times of use to those cheap moments, basically.
And again, question that wasn't really agreed upon beforehand, but I would really like to tap into that. Also, Sonia mentioned that there is, of course, the house in itself, and that has a dimension of being able to store heat. Is that just enough to create those savings, or would you suggest that maybe on the investment side, especially for the hot water, it might make sense to have a bit of a larger boiler, because that enables you to have a bit more flexibility in the system? Or would you say, no, usually just the house in itself has enough potential to be really a flexible asset in the end in the market?
Yeah, exactly. So definitely the house in itself has that potential if you can access the valves that can open or close a underfloor heating circuit, for example. Then you can really use the house as this thermal battery. And that's where our room control device, so our smart radiated thermostats and our smart thermostats can come into play, because they are the little guys in your home who can actually connect the smart control of your heat pump with these rooms and open up these circuits when you want to use these thermal batteries.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Can I add a little bit?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the two ladies look a bit if they wanted to jump in, but we have to bring in Andy sooner or later. But please do go ahead.
So, ladies first, Oliver.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, just to share our experience with smart tariffs. Oh, am I back?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll face this way maybe. Yeah, so we launched our Cozy Octopus tariff, which is a quite simple kind of 3-rate tariff at the end of last year, where you have cheap periods where we try and encourage people to heat their hot water, preheat their home, and an expensive peak period. And we've got about 400 customers that have been on it now for 6 months. And we've just looked at that data, and they've saved on average £188 over 6 months, despite the price distortions we have in the market, which I think is really encouraging. And when I spoke to those customers, they're not doing anything crazy. Most of them are using standard heat pump controls and just programming them to run in those periods. And they're still comfortable, they're still getting a good scop. And all the stuff that Sonia and Kai are talking about, and that we'll be doing with our new ecosystem as well, is, that's level 1.0, but this is level 2 and level 3, and I think those savings will get even greater over time.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. So the basic idea is to use weather forecasts in order to cut overheating and cut overcooling. That's one way to actually save immediately 5 to 15% of energy consumption, and that is one way to have the comfort in place, and at the same time not just use energy when it doesn't make sense, because you get the solar radiation, you get the higher outdoor temperatures, and thereby heat your home. And the second thing is also regarding dynamic electricity prices, which are changing every single hour, or in the UK every half hour, or in the future in the Nordics, for instance, every 50 minutes. You actually do very little optimization, and not for long periods of time. And that is also the way on not having a really big, or you don't really have to have the really big storage for that, because they are changing in such a fast pace. I want to encourage customers to just use the existing infrastructure, your home, your heat pump, the thermal, or the thermal buffer that you just need for your own usage, and then optimize that. You don't really have to overinvest in your heat pump or in your buffer.
Okay.
Totally agree.
Speaking of the investment,
Could I make a couple of observations on what we've already talked about? Actually, if I don't
absolutely.
say it now, I'll forget. Okay.
Absolutely, you may.
What your offer? Octopus, heat pump for free, essentially, I think it's fantastic. And when we discussed yesterday, and the panels yesterday were asked about.
I believe you should probably use the mic.
I use the microphone. Is the microphone turned on? Yep.
Yeah.
When the panels discussed yesterday about the one thing that could happen to accelerate growth in the heat pump market, it's an obvious thing to say, but a cheaper heat pump is actually what the industry needs. And it's a challenge for manufacturers in the room, but a cheaper heat pump, right? That would be the big thing. That would absolutely change the market. So I think that's the number one challenge, and what you're doing, Amy, at Octopus is fantastic, because that's the kind of innovation that we need to see. The other observation I'll make is just on the bans. I disagree with your view, actually. My view, I think bans are useful because they send a really clear message to consumers. They give consumers certainty that this is going to happen, and they can rely on that. It's a cross-party consensus that it's going to happen, and it's independent of politics. I think getting rid of a ban can send a mixed message to consumers and throw doubt. And we've seen that recently, actually, in Germany with the big policy debate, and the market has really declined as a result of the uncertainty by consumers about what's the outcome of the policy in Germany. So I think those bans do have a role. I'm against government intervention, but I think in this context they are useful actually for consumers.
If you excuse me for making the joke, I believe the ban in Germany will cost the government its job, but so it is also a tough decision for government to make. Now as you were talking about cheaper heat pumps, and I agree that probably also with the price differences that still exists compared to gas, one of the things to make people buy into the technology and also engage with the technology probably is to bring the capex that they feel down. And it is my understanding that part of your value proposition as LCP Delta is really to move into, let's say, the next level of service, namely offering heating as a service. And I already mentioned to you that in Germany, having tried this for the past 15 years, we always ended up in court somehow because we fought over the long-term agreement. But share your experience, and I believe for certain people and certain parts of the population, that's probably the way to go because the capex is too high for certain people.
Yeah, so just to clarify, we're a research consulting company working for large utility companies, manufacturers, technology companies, helping them develop propositions and strategies to navigate the transition.
So it's not your proposition, but you're helping people. Yeah.
So we're advising companies in developing all types of propositions actually for the energy transition. And lots of digital business models, and heat as a service is certainly one of them. And it was discussed again yesterday, the challenge of capex. And I think we see this mega trend in the energy sector with energy moving from a commodity-based business to a service-based business model. It's about solutions and services to customers going forward. We've been working in this area for about a decade, more than a decade actually. And that trend is well understood, I think, in the industry now, but how do you make money from it is still a big challenge. The commercials of that transition from a commodity sale from an energy company or selling a box for a manufacturing company to providing a service and making a return on that is a big challenge and remains a big challenge. And so lots of business models are being explored, and as a service business models are certainly one of those. Within the context of the heat pump market, I think it's really relevant because of the capex challenge at the moment for heat pumps. Consumers, at the moment, as was just again pointed out, I think by Louisa from the IEA yesterday, in Europe, heat pumps are able to pay technology at the moment. It's not a mass market technology. To bring it into the mass market, that capex challenge needs to be addressed, and as a service business models are a way of doing that. So we see this shift from commodity to services, and one of the key enablers, or there's two key enablers actually, one is green finance and the other one is digital, particularly AI. So what we see happening is the green finance market is becoming more and more engaged, and there's a wave of capex or finance available, I think, to fund the energy transition, but how does it get access to these assets? And as a service business models, the opportunity for energy companies, I think, is to lead the deployment of those. As a service business models are a way they can deploy that green finance. So for customers, I think it's a great business model. The risks for them are technology risk. They don't understand heat pumps. If you get into a conversation with a customer on heat pumps, it's quite challenging. I think Octopus will have found that. They don't understand the technology, and they're scared by the risk of the technology. But they also have the capex challenge, and all of those challenges, I think, can be addressed by as a service type business models. We see the market developing slowly. Germany's probably the best example right now. We estimate about 4 or 5% of heat pump installs in Germany are on a contract basis, so on a as a service basis. So maybe 10,000 units last year. So the market is developing, and it will grow further.
So if I may add up on that, because I was brought up in a very conservative energy company, that was RWE, and I believe in RWE there was one simple logic: retail does not have capex. Period. So, but what you're telling us more or less is that you take the capex away from the customer and put it on what used to be an energy company, or maybe is a startup, that then needs to find the finance. And that's probably also a bit of things that Amy is thinking about. So maybe if you can elaborate a bit on both of you on that challenge. Is it a challenge? Do banks, do whatever equity companies understand the proposition easily? Or is that something that you really need to work upon? Maybe we start with Amy and then go back to Andy.
Yeah, I mean, I think our key focus has been to bring down the cost so that ideally it's so cheap you don't need to finance. And that is fortunately the position we're in the UK, and I hope we get to other countries soon as well. But having said that, there is definitely a need for finance. I think there's a need for lots of different solutions because customers have different preferences for how they like to buy things. And I also think there's a strong regional difference there as well. So that sort of thing works really well in countries like Germany, for example, where the cost is higher, and I think people are much more familiar with this rental model. Whereas in the UK, I think people are a little bit more skeptical towards long-term subscriptions. So we definitely need that in the mix, I think. And, there are lots of options out there for it, but I think, who was it who was saying yesterday, it's much easier, I think it was Philip saying that it's much easier to lend to a manufacturer rather than install it. There are still some challenges in the industry.
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, we see big differences between countries, between customers in France, Germany, UK, as the appetite for these types of business models and their willingness to take on debt, and the frequency they move homes. Things like that make a big difference. But actually, I mean, one of the sort of theses we're developing at the moment is that for energy suppliers, so just thinking about energy companies really, they've been commodity suppliers, they're transitioning to service providers. And actually, they are in a really good position to help customers go on a net zero journey, which is, heat is a big part of that, but it's about more than heat. It's about the whole home. It's about energy efficiency. It's about optimization, digital solutions in the home. It's about EV wall boxes. And energy suppliers are perfectly positioned to be that supplier of taking customers on a net zero journey, as I think Octopus is largely doing. And you could, let's assume 20,000 euros per home across Europe will be needed to fund that. If it's possible for the energy service company, for the energy retailers to be the supplier of those solutions and to finance that, then they can be the sort of, if you like, the producers of micro debt across Europe, which can be aggregated, which will then release the green finance wave, enable that green finance wave to be deployed. Because if there's scale, as Philip suggested yesterday, I think, if there's scale, it becomes interesting for a Deutsche Bank or a JP Morgan or somebody to deploy millions of capital, billions of capital into this space. So, perhaps it's not the servitization of energy that we should be thinking about, but the financialization of energy, actually, which will be the magic ingredient that gets this moving forward.
Do we need a Freddie Mac or a Fannie Mae is just the question that pops up in my head. so an institution that can be resold to. But you don't need to answer that.
I think the private capital is there, and it's looking for a way in, and this might be the way it gets in, actually.
So you more or less answered the question, but I would still come back to that one. So you said markets are different, and I was just thinking, of course, Germany is very famous for the fact that still the majority of the population lives in rented places, and does that play into that? So I would suggest that the app would probably be, if it is just an app, be very agnostic to that situation, while if somebody needs to buy a thermostat for a rented home, that might already be a barrier. So from your experience, does it play a role whether people own their houses or whether they rent them? Because renting the house might also make them more easily rent the heating system, I would suggest. So is that something that really changes the landscape?
Yeah, I think it probably plays into that as well. But the one thing I would say is, I think we also, bear in mind we've launched heat pumps in 3 countries now, and every country says, UK homes are really unique, or German homes are really unique, and they like to do things in a certain way. There are some differences, but there are far more similarities between them than differences. And I think the way we can all be more effective is to design, global solutions. A bit like when Apple designed a product, it is the same hardware, but they have some different charging accessories and different firmware for different countries, right? So if we design things with that mindset, it helps us all collectively get the scale we need to bring down those costs even further and be successful in this market. So just as a general point, I really want to focus on what kind of unifies, and there's a lot more of that, I think, than what's different.
I believe you just said one of the biggest secrets of Europe, people are much closer than they think, and we need to remind them of that, but that's just the personal.
Yeah, I would argue here that regarding your, like, is it a service only or like a hardware plus the service? Like, obviously, like if you're using already like the existing Wi-Fi module in the heat pump and then accessing it through the API, you don't have to have like additional hardware there, and that's definitely like decreasing again like investments in the whole smart control feature of the house. However, like regarding like renting or owning, you have like somebody has anyway done like the big investment of the heat pump. So maybe they put also like the big investment of the smart thermostat on top of it. So basically you're also available, or like you can, I mean, put services on top of it if you have the smart infrastructure in place.
How do you see interoperability? I mean, I know Tado, Kai, you'd like to comment on this, but we always see the sort of connections and getting those global solutions. One of the key challenges is kit talking to one another and having access.
Yeah, that's the issue, right? Compatibility. I think to get these kind of smart propositions to the mass market, you need three things. You need wide compatibility. We're known for that with our smart thermostat, 95% compatibility with gas-fired boilers, not only relay and open term, for example. And the same thing needs to happen with smart solutions for heat pumps. It doesn't matter how you go, right? You can go the API route, that's fine. You can go the hardware route, that's fine, but has a downside of an investment in a piece of hardware. However, if the average savings can be higher with the hardware compared to what's now possible over an API, we see that consumers are still interested in buying that piece of hardware. But yeah, before we're there, it would be a great help when APIs are more available, because I fully agree, in the ideal world, you don't need a piece of hardware anymore. You can go the API route, and that should be fine. Yeah.
So
I will add just like one comment on it. Like, yes, like the APIs are like in this stage at the moment. It's the API industry in heat pump in the heat pump world is like starting to like go and go like be more professional. We saw it already like in the photovoltaics industry. We saw it in the EVs, how like OEM APIs work and how they can how OEMs can harness more revenue through the APIs, but then you need to have like a developer portal, or you need to have like a good authentication method. You need to describe like what kind of points can be read, what kind of points can be written, and the better like that kind of documentation exists, the easier it is for third-party developers to access and build on top of that hardware new services that then the consumers want to buy and have like an easier time to get the savings.
We don't have an OEM on the stage right now, but it probably would be interesting to ask them how open would they be, and would they create their own app or rather use a functioning app from somebody else, but we can't do this. Though Sabina already has collected the bags for everybody on stage, I believe. I would really like to open the floor, so if there's anything that we haven't touched upon or that came to your mind while we were sitting here and discussing with these wonderful people, on a couple of issues. Maybe there's a question in the room that we can answer. Otherwise, I'll make up one myself. But I would absolutely, and I know the people too, prefer probably a question from the audience, which I can't really see. There's one lady in the front.
Also there.
There's a microphone as well. Wonderful.
Is it on? Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Lisa from Kenza. It's a question for Amy. I was wondering whether you have plans in Octopus for when the government subsidies run out for heat pumps, and how you're planning on carrying on with that offer when that time comes.
Yeah, well, I hope that time comes. And I hope that they reduce quite quickly, to be honest. I mean, we always suggested a lower amount than 7,500. We're pleased to have that now and the interest that's generating, but I really hope, I think it's more than we need. If we're selling some heat pumps for £500, that's almost too cheap. So I hope that will taper down over time, because that's what we need to keep us all on our toes in the industry, right, and to keep innovating. And the one thing I will say about the UK grant, which I think is really good and something to look at for other countries, is super simple. They really consulted with companies like Octopus and lots of others to understand what works for a customer. It's a fixed amount taken straight off the ticket price. Everything's done by the installer. They just send an email to the customer, say, are you happy with that? And they say yes. super easy. So I think it's really well designed. It is a bit much at the moment, but it should taper over time. And based on our cost projections and what I'm hearing from other people in the industry, I think we will be able to do that within the length of the scheme.
So maybe if we can keep to the subsidy subject, because that also somehow intrigues me. My perspective on that is it's always a bit looking at the German solar experience. Probably that was over-subsidized dramatically, but on the other hand, it really turned the production cost cycle also dramatically, and it gave, I tend to believe, solar to the world. Maybe that's a bit too much, but it was at least instrumental in getting there. So how do you play that? How much subsidy, when to take it off? We're all, I believe, if I understood you correctly, also a bit skeptical of too much governmental intervention on this panel. So what would you suggest? What would you do? Let's put the question this way: if you were the energy secretary in the UK government,
I would be a terrible policymaker.
Now let's say you wake up one morning and you are. What's your next move, Andy?
For me, it's about customers, actually. And the industry talks about technologies and networks and things, but actually we need to unlock the power of customers. So policy, I think, needs to be more orientated towards helping customers, not equally, as we discussed yesterday again, particularly the socially disadvantaged and the not able to pay part of the market, which is frankly the part of the market that's not engaged at the moment with this. They want to be, from our research that we do. Everyone is concerned about the planet and climate change. So we have to help those customers participate. So if I was in the policy world, I would focus policy on enabling customers to participate and trying to do that fairly.
Kai, any thoughts from your side on that?
Yeah, I hope the subsidies stay for a long time, but I also hope that we are able to provide smart services that can, in the end, replace these subsidies with a strong promise to save on your energy cost, right? So the smarter our services get, with our current heat pump connector, you already save up to 430 euros a year. So over the lifetime of a heat pump, let's say 15 years, you earn back 6,000 euros by applying these smart services on top of your heat pump. You could even put that into an energy as a service proposition, if you like to, as a utility, for example. But I don't believe that these subsidies are endless, right? That always ends at some point. And when that point arrives, we need to be ready to replace that with our services.
Nobody ever asked for a subsidy for an app. Well, I believe there was one for one of the German COVID apps, but forget about that. If you want, you may, Sonia, of course, also talk about subsidies, but probably it's not what you're most focused upon. Maybe to close the panel, and if there's another question from the audience, be happy to take it. If you would shortly introduce yourself, sir, please.
Pierre Boyer, Differentia. The conversation this morning has been mostly about the residential sector. We heard yesterday it's also about commercial and industrial applications, and I wanted to ask the panel what your thoughts were. Is it easier or more difficult in that environment, and of the digital and financial tools, which do you see as most relevant in that environment?
So you're thinking about large-scale installations, either to run a district heating system based on that?
Large-scale commercial and industrial.
Okay. So,
yeah,
of course.
I can start at least. Capacity was starting with real estate, like heat pumps, so starting from 90 kilowatts thermal. And we were accessing it very similarly, so through the cloud connectivities of building management systems. And they're having we saw a big difference between how real estate customers had their electricity electricity contracts before last winter and what happened afterwards. So there's more and more variability between fixed electricity prices and then the dynamic electricity price on top. And the more they also the commercial real estate sector is taking dynamic electricity prices into account, the more they need to have also the smart controls in place. Furthermore, they are also bound with the ESG targets. So the more they are getting, for instance, points for various certificates such as LEED or or BREEAM in order to like get their buildings cleaner, get them greener, reduce the actual CO2 emissions of like their consumption. Those are also the things that our existing real estate customers are looking after. And there the same thing applies. So we are not adding as additional hardware, we're using the smart BMS system and control thereby like the larger heat pumps.
Yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity, actually. I think there's going to be a massive opportunity in that space. So for the companies in this room who are in that space, I think the good times are ahead. I think the new law in Germany is going to drive a lot of electrification in industry. So that's going to be a big part of the growth market, I think. I think Steve from Ariba Technologies was telling me yesterday that they've sort of got the case study of the first degassed hospital in the UK, which I thought was really interesting. So you might want to find Steve after this session, have a chat with him about that.
So, that is maybe the moment when I thank the panel. Savina keeps nodding, so that means I shall. Thank you also to the audience for being here and joining us and helping us out with a question or two. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Kai. Thank you, Andy, for being here with us today. I hope and I believe that was lively and also I learned quite a bit. I hope that some people in the room can share that experience. And now we didn't talk about rugby, which I'm very sorry about, because that was our original plan yesterday. Because if you can get Amy and Andy started on rugby, this will be much more entertaining, even more entertaining. So
you need beer for that.
You need beer for that. So maybe in a later break today. Thank you so much, and keep enjoying the rest of the day.
Well, thank you very much, Olli. You delivered spot on. I felt this was very entertaining. I learned that we are moving CapEx from the end user to the company. We are introducing services, and I understand that we are ready because the heat pumps become more and more connected and can become a valuable asset into the renewables grid. We also learned yesterday that we should present ourselves more positively. So you want to go more renewables, you need more connected heat pumps.